You're listening to Limitless Leaders Podcast. Accelerate your mindset, collaboration and performance by developing limitless self-leadership, leaders, teams and organizations. Now, over to your host, Renee Giarrusso.
Hi, and welcome to the Limitless Leaders Podcast. Wherever you're watching or tuning in from around the world, we welcome you. So we're over the halfway year mark, 2023, and it's been an interesting year, especially in Australia. There's been a lot of things going on. And what I've seen with a lot of clients and leadership groups, especially the last few months, people are feeling a bit demotivated. They're feeling a bit burnt out, a bit overwhelmed. There's less people doing more. And a lot of people are really juggling that hybrid environment and getting their teams back into the office. So we've been doing a lot of work around that. And today I'm super excited to introduce you to Adrian Baillargeon. So Adrian is a leadership and team expert, and he's obsessed with helping some of the best leaders with the games that matter most to them. So with 20 years plus corporate experience across Canada, Africa, and Australia, he's worked extensively in marketing, sales, strategy, and joint venture management. He's been involved with transformations, mergers, downsizing, and expansion, and has received state, national, and global awards. Adrian is also the author of a brand new book, his first book, Teams That Swear, by each other, not about each other. Welcome, Adrian.
Hey, Renee, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to today, and your book did catch my eye. I get a lot of books sent over, and this one has really caught my eye, and it's a fantastic book. I've had a read through, so I really look forward to talking about, I guess, leadership and some of your ideas, insights and models around Teams That Swear. So to kick off, Adrian, I'd love to just ask you, a little bit of your background, where you've got to where you are today.
Oh, it's an open-ended question, Renee. We could go anywhere with that. So
Good.
feel free to rein me in if you need to at any stage. So originally from Canada, born and raised in Western Canada. So, growing up, the childhood was very much, winter was a big part of our life. And in Canada, you typically, if you're a young boy at that stage, you grew up with a pair of ice skates on. So a typical childhood, playing hockey, playing a lot of sport, and then baseball in the summer. And then, I suppose as I grew up and you got into, what am I going to do with my life? After high school, that question. And I didn't want to, I love sport, but I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't think that was for me. I wasn't good at science or any of that. I thought, okay, well, I'll just go into business. And so studied finance and marketing. And from there was really just, I worked with a few different corporates, and we're talking big brands. So this is Imperial Oil, like the equivalent of Exxon Mobil in Canada, and then in the pharmaceutical space with a global pharmaceutical company. And then in 2005, I moved to Australia. So going from a place from Saskatoon, population of 250,000 people, all the way to Melbourne, 5 million. So it was a big move. Yeah, absolutely. My wife is from here, and we lived in Canada for a year and a half, or a winter and a half, really. And then we came back here. And the plan was, we're going to live in Canada for a bit. We're going to check it out. And then I'll move here and we'll live here for a couple of years. But I think probably from the time we landed, 51% of our decision was made. So that's how I ended up here from like a professional perspective. Worked 20 years across different corporates as an employee. Probably the common theme across my career was either leading teams or working with a number of external partners, where it's going, right, how do we create these cultures? Or if you're working with an external partner, say in sponsorship or joint venture, how do you create these micro cultures where you've got two different ways of working coming together and going, right, how do we tick boxes for both of us and find our way of working together? So that's how it all started out. Now, I'm in the space of working with leadership teams, trying to to help them really identify what's important to them and find what is the best way for that group to achieve what they're trying to do.
And I love that, because that group, because it's different for every group. And I think leadership and teaming or teamwork is in the eye of the beholder of that group. Yeah, which is so important. So what, can I just ask you to kick off, what does leadership mean to you?
You know what I found, Renee, is even like there's certain terms like leadership and culture, and the more that I double click on it or get a little bit deeper, the more confusing it gets for me, because it really does encompass so many different things.
It does, yeah.
So when I think about leadership, there's a couple of things. I think the main thing about leadership, and this is I don't think it necessarily, people will say it's not a title.
No.
I think within businesses, you've got managers, right? And they typically manage people and they manage a certain outcome that they're working towards. Leaders, you can manage people, but you don't have to. To me, leadership is understanding what's important to you and then following that or pushing that and staying on that path, doing what you think is right.
Yeah, I love that. And do you think leaders, whether you've got the title or not, need to manage and lead? Because they're two different things and they go together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even, let's say, if you do have people who report into you, there are pieces you have to manage. You have to manage a project, a timeline.
Right.
Certain deliverables have to be delivered. And there are skills that are management skills. The leadership space, to me, if you're a leader, you're actually unlocking a lot of potential, and you're actually delivering more than just those tangible, those quantitative KPIs that everybody has. The leadership, it unlocks a lot more opportunity.
It does. I always liken it to Batman and Robin. So when you're a leader, Batman's a leader, Robin's a manager. And I've always had a bit of a 70-30 split, just based on, years of work I've done. But you're right. I think the management, you're in the coalface, you're in the team, and you need that element, especially at the moment. There's a lot of disconnection out there. And then the leadership, I love that. It's unlocking potential. And I always say, empowering others so you can do what matters, and you're creating future leaders. I think that at the end of the day is a leader's role, to create future leaders.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah. And or Supergirl and Superwoman for those girls out there listening. So before we go into your book, I'd love to just ask you, and I ask most of my podcast guests this, I'm a big believer in the gift mindset, and it's a concept I've lived since I was 23 and obviously written a book on. Gift mindset is about being open to unwrap the lessons or the gifts in challenging people and events and positive people and events. I say a challenging person, I call them a Kris Kringle. You ask for perfume, you get socks, but they teach you the most. The pandemic was pass the parcel. You unwrap that bit of paper, you don't know what you're going to get, right? So in your career and life to date, because we live our whole selves, what would be a gift or a lesson that you've learned from something that you use now to progress yourself forward?
You know what? When you were doing your introduction, and you were talking about people, needing to be their best, and there's lots of burnout, and it's a mid-year, and mid-year is always it's a great point just to say, right, we're halfway through. What can I do differently? What should I keep doing? What I should stop doing? If there's one lesson that I think that served me the best, and this, I've always been a teams person. I've played team sport. I've coached sport. I've obviously worked in corporate. But what I do know to be true is that before a team can be at its best, is that each person in that team needs to know what they need to be at their best, and make sure that that's part of the regular routine, whether that's a daily, whether it's a weekly, quarterly, monthly, whatever it might be. And this is particularly true for leaders. Because leading in this hybrid environment right now, I just find it is so difficult for leaders right now, because some businesses are rebuilding, some are really expanding, some are still struggling, they're still surviving. which is all three are different contexts and bring different pressures. Then we're throwing in this whole new way of working that there's some leaders are getting pressure from the organization to say, we want our people in all the time or X amount of days. And then you've got others that are going, just do whatever you want. And some in the middle that are like, just do what the people want to do. That makes it, and this is all unknown. So it's more pressure, more stress on top of the regular stresses that come with everyday managing, everyday leading. So the biggest thing that what I'm finding with leaders right now is, and I do this all the time before we start working on with the leadership team in terms of how they do together better, it's actually giving permission to reflect and reconnect with what each person needs to be at their best.
Love that.
And if it's just, we don't give ourselves permission to think about, whoa, stop here. What are the things that keep me going, keep my energy levels at their ideal level? And then if I can get that in place, and this is the key, is like when leaders can take care of themselves, they are 20 times more effective at what you suggested before, unlocking the potential of others. So that one lesson is going, make sure you're prioritizing yourself. When you're doing your to-do list on Sunday night or at the morning, what is that one thing that you're going to put on there and that you're going to keep as a non-negotiable that's going to help you keep you at your best, that puts you in position then to help others more?
And it's so important. Like at the moment, I think Australia, it's 1 in 4 are suffering burnout and mental illness. And I always say, who's looking after the leader? That's something I always talk about. And filling your cup and taking the time to reflect, reset, and refocus. And it's so important. I wanted to ask you, I'm a big believer in motivational intelligence. So not doing what you're good at, but doing what you're good at that you enjoy. We actually map that. So, you might be amazing at analyzing data, but you wake up and feel sick to the stomach because you just don't like it. That's also part of what you said. So know what you are good at, that you enjoy, not just what you're good at, and share that with your teammates, because then you can leverage the diversity of a team and raise as a strength-based team.
I love that. I think that's something, when I'm talking about being at your best, to me, there's 4 different sources of energy. And one of them is your inner energy. And that's about knowing your purpose, your values, your authenticity. But there's that piece around what you enjoy doing. And like for me, I know when I worked in the corporate space, for me, that was actually running a kids T-ball program. I love that. Friday afternoons at 5:30. And so my work was very good at that because they knew that gave me energy and that made me a better person. So on Fridays at 3 o'clock, they were fine with me knocking off early. Getting home early so then I could get to the ballpark and set things up. And then have a great time with all the kids. So I think it's a good example.
And it can be in or out of work. I say you've got to bring your whole self to life. You need to integrate it. I don't think there's one or the other. And I always say, give the world the best of you, not what's left of you, because I'm guilty of that. I'm not a great person with self-care. I'm very driven, and work gives me so much joy that sometimes it blurs over. So let's get into your book. I'm super excited for this.
All right.
So teams that swear by each other, not about each other. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, where the name came from and what is sort of the master message of this book?
Well, it's funny, Renee, because a couple of people said to me, they're like, do you really teach people how to swear at work? And I'm like, no. And I'm not a huge swearer either. So I'm not necessarily advocating just for the workplace to become a place of profanities. But so the title of the book, Teams That Swear, was inspired by a colleague of mine who, when I came to Australia, I found that Aussies, in my mind, Aussies swore a little bit more.
Definitely.
Like just in general, and there were certain words, one word in particular, that if I used that back home, it was more of a derogatory term. And if you called somebody this word, it was like, gloves are dropped, you're ready for a little bit of a Donnybrook. Here was a term of endearment.
What?
Oh, a Donnybrook, so a fight.
Okay, see, I just love learning all the different terms.
Yeah, that's a really important one, right? A Donnybrook. But so but what I found was, there's more swearing. And then I had a colleague who I worked really well with, connected well. We could disagree on things, but this person swore a lot. And I would point that out. I'd give them a little bit of a hard time saying, geez, you've got a potty mouth. And they'd say, no, I don't worry about it. It's good for you. And I was a little bit stubborn, right? Because I was saying, oh, you're just typical Aussie. You're swearing all the time. So me being a little stubborn, jumped onto Google because I was like, well, let's see. Let's put this to bed. Who's right? And funny enough, we were both right. Aussies are in the top 5 countries in terms of countries that swear.
What's the number one?
So Russia.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
I can imagine. I don't know any Russian, but I can imagine it would be very strong and terse.
It would be, and it would sound like swearing even if it wasn't. Yeah.
That's right. They could be saying good morning, and we're going, oh my God, they're swearing. But so Aussies do swear quite a bit relative to the rest of the world. But the other thing is that my colleague was right, is that swearing actually has benefits.
Yes.
So
Let's talk about those.
okay, cool. So I talk about them in the book, but there's a couple that are really fascinating. That have nothing to do with teamwork, but it's like still it's professional development, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
one of the pieces of research talked about the study that they did was they would have this strength test. They would have to do this squeezing test, and it would measure how strong they were. And they would get a group to do it by just doing that by saying no words. Second group would say it, saying they're just they called it a neutral word, so i.e. a non-swearing word. And then they would do it a third time, but while they're doing it, they would get them to repeat their favorite swear word over and over. And lo and behold, the group, the people that were the strongest were the ones that were swearing. So, maybe Lance Armstrong should have maybe considered that instead of jumping on the other things that he took to get stronger. But so it makes you stronger. Another one showed that it actually increases your pain threshold. So similar type of study.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is one you want to try at home, but it's ice bucket of water. See how long you can keep your hand in the bucket. Again, saying nothing, saying a neutral word, and swearing, saying a swear word. The group that could keep their hand the longest, and this was over 40 seconds longer than any other group, was the group that was continuing to say their favorite swear word.
I love it. So what behind that around when it's that whole state, right? So if we go into neuroscience, so if you're swearing, you're focusing on those words and they're punchy and you're getting them out with energy, that time goes more quickly. Is that part of it?
Yeah, the research weren't able to talk about the physiological reasoning behind it, but I think swear words do have a power that other words don't. There's something there's a little bit more emotional. Yeah. So whether there might be something in the adrenal system where the more adrenaline is pumping because it evokes certain emotions, but the third piece of research on this, and this is probably more related to the things that your listeners are looking for around teamwork, was there's a piece of research that was done across Australia and New Zealand. Kind of ironic that there's a piece of research around swearing, or some swearing benefits from Australia. Yeah. But what this group set out to look at, all right, we're going to look at a number of different teams, and we're going to identify why do some teams perform better. Yeah. And so this is not going to be a surprise. One of the main contributors to the teams that were performing better is that they had higher levels of trust. Yeah. I think that's pretty safe assumption. We probably didn't need to do a piece of research to suggest that. But this is the really cool bit, when they're like, okay, but we want to get deeper. Like, we know trust is good, but what actually strengthens trust amongst teams? And one of the traits that they're able to physically see or physically hear was that the teams that had the highest levels of trust, they found that they swore around each other more often. So it would be either in jokes,
around each other.
So an expert like yourself, you jump into it right away. So what they found is that when they talked to the people, they said, you guys swear more than other teams. How come? And they said, well, I can just feel like I can be myself. I can drop my guard. I'm not going to be judged. Yeah. People, even if I swear in a bad way, people aren't going to think, geez, Renee, what a jerk, or you're a bad person, right? They know me. And then, yeah, right. And what they found is that when people would swear in front of each other, it actually made the trust stronger. It built on it. So it's so that's the idea. But when it comes to swearing in teams, there's a right way and a wrong way, right? And again, this is where the title of the book. If you're swearing by each other and in front of each other, bang, good. That's the good way.
Yep.
If you're swearing about each other, and often when that happens behind each other's backs, that's when it's no good. So there is a right way and a wrong way when it comes to swearing.
I just love that. It's the openness to be yourself, and without bringing in, like you said before, leadership, culture, vulnerability. They're all buzzwords. They've been around forever, but it's about being your true self and having that deep connection and rapport. And it's also, well, the byproduct of that, Adrian, is psychological safety, or creating a safe space, right? So swearing sort of is an indicator, isn't it? It's a lag. It's an indicator that, hey, they must be comfortable around each other. You wouldn't be new in a team and swear your head off, most probably, right? Depends what industry.
Yeah.
So with psychological safety, I'd love to ask you, what are some tips that leaders can do to foster this? And what are some tips that their team can do as a peer type sort of thing to foster psychological safety?
Yeah, I think that a couple of the things that a leader can do. One is when you're talking with a team member or somebody who's reporting into you, anytime they come up with an idea, or they've got a concern, or perfect world, they might have made a mistake and they're telling you, rather than going right away going, oh, okay, now what are we going to do? Or, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Or like facial expressions, right? Or you're like, that says a lot. Even though that might be internally your initial reaction, is actually give your brain a chance to move away from the emotional response to a logical response. And a really easy way to do that is like using 3 words. Tell me more. If as a leader can just get away from that initial reaction of wanting to fix or frustration is showing, actually dig in a little bit. So one, it's going to give you time for your brain to calm down a little bit. Secondly, you're going to get more context, right? Because you're going to be making some assumptions. By just saying, tell me more, you're going to get more of that context, more understanding of where that individual is coming from. And also the impact you're going to have on the other person is like, right, I've just told them I've stuffed up or I'm struggling with something, and they want to know more. They're interested in hearing what I'm saying. And so I think that is something, just those 3 words. Again, words are very powerful. Swearing has a different impact, but just 3 powerful words like that can then make it comfortable for the other person to share. But just as importantly, it makes you more comfortable.
Yeah, I love that. And that tell me more always opens up something that's more open. And it makes the other person, I think, feel important and listened to, which is quite a profound thing these days, to actually feel listened to. No, I love that. I think, moving beyond mistakes and supporting, we the GIF mindset, that's the culture, is that. It's being able to share a mistake or a stuff up. I've got companies running Failure Fridays, Win Wednesdays, so they actually share their failures, but not just the what, but the how they move through them. And I just, so tell me more, tell me about it. It's a great way for those of you listening, I guess, to respond with logic instead of reacting with emotion, which is so important. I love that. And high-performing teams, like one of the key traits is psychological safety. What else do you think is a really good indicator if you were to shine a light on a team to straight away sort of see, is it a high-performing and happy team?
So there's probably 2 things when it comes to high-performing teams that my view is that it comes down to 2 things. Because if you jump on to Google, jump in there, how to create high-performing teams, you'll get like, I think the last time I did it was like 4.3 billion results in 0.4 of a second, right? It's like, oh, it's really simple to run teams. Well, that's what I tried to make it. I wanted to say, right, if there was maybe 2 things that you could focus on. And through the research that I did through the book, and then I pull in 20 years of experience working in the corporate space across the world, to me, it came down to 2 things: relationships and clarity. So and we've talked about some of the things around. So to me, relationships matter most. There's no doubt about that. So the things that contribute to a strong and mature relationship within groups, we've talked about. 1, psychological safety, right? Just that you don't fear being judged. The other one is around personal connection. There's a baseball manager, Joe Madden. He's like my hero. I've never met him yet, but one day I will. But so he worked Major League Baseball, and he talks about how he says, I cannot build trust with my players until I have a connection with them. Once I build that connection, that opens the door for trust. Now, this is not really, I find in the corporate space, like I hear this term, I'm not here to make friends.
Oh, yeah.
Or, you know, and people saying as a leader, don't get too close to your people. I disagree with that.
Yeah, I do too.
100%.
Yeah.
I think when you do have that connection, when you feel comfortable in sharing challenges that might be work related or not work related, I think when you understand what drives people, you want to work with them and for them more often.
Right.
And if leadership is about what we talked about, unlocking potential and creating future leaders, we have to understand them and we have to have that connection. So in relationships, it's a connection, it's a trust, it's a safety. But then the other ones, and this, like, what would I see or hear or shine a light on? One, I'd be looking for that feedback is shared.
Yes,
right?
it's a big one.
Now, it has to be shared in the right way. But the best way for feedback to be shared is if somebody asks for it.
Yeah.
It is so much easier when it's the reverse and you see something like, oh crap, am I going to tell Renee something? And then I'm worried about what you're going to think about me. You're not going to like me anymore. And then you're going to take and you'll be like, freaking, what is Adrian? He doesn't even know what's going on. But that if you can hear teams providing feedback to each other, that's a great sign of high performance. And the other one is around conflict.
Yes.
Right. And I know you're a big fan of diversity of thought.
Diversity of thought and conflict for good, because you can't avoid it. But I think what you can do is manage it and get the best outcome, idea, relationship, or change through conflict.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to conflict, there's the unproductive conflict.
Yeah.
And this is the bit that the unproductive conflict, if you look at that, here's a sign of a high-performing teams. The very best teams can get through that conflict. Conflict is inevitable. It will happen. But the very best teams get through that in an effective and productive way. And when they do, they build great momentum and they wield great power. Yeah. You think about, you probably can think of some unproductive conflict, right? What happens? It actually, all that momentum that you've created up to that point, it's stalled. And
that's right. It's static. I think conflict, you think of some of the best ideas in the world and, the changes in the world, not just in a team, but like globally come through conflict. And, I'm not agreeing that conflict's always great, but I look at conflict, I always say it's an opportunity to do and be more. That's, I'm very much into, who do you need to be and what do you need to do in that order. And conflict can be a conduit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the Wu-Tang Clan, right? I've got a very diverse range of music.
I love it. And I love your stories, by the way, throughout your book. I think stories is such a great way to get a message across. It's memorable.
Yeah, and in the book, I talk about the Wu-Tang Clan around conflict. And when the leader of the band started it, he actually leveraged conflict or difference of opinion, or he got the members of the group to actually compete with each other.
Yeah.
He'd say, right, here's the tune, but I want you to come up with your own lyrics. And then they come together and they'd be like, okay, Renee, your turn. Mic drop, let's go. And you do your rap and then I would do mine. And then the group would decide, right, which one did they like? Right. And it was a great way of going, let's actually get two different opinions, two different perspectives, two ways of going at that, and then see if there's one that stands out or resonates more. Or sometimes you might actually find, we want to take a little bit of this one, we're going to take a little bit of that one, put them together, get something even better.
Beautiful. I love that. And I think conflict and feedback and coaching obviously are passions of both of ours, because especially feedback, I think, what's the old saying? There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. We actually have, Adrian, I've got companies that have implemented my stay interviews. This is 3 years ago. I came up with it. So every quarter, why are you staying? What's keeping you here? What are you adding? What do you need? How do you want to be stretched? and it increases retention, but it prevents the exit interviews and people leaving for the wrong reason. So it's about consistency, isn't it? And having that respectful and trusting environment to actually share.
And you know what, when you talk about consistent, I love that that's a discussion, that's a regular thing. I mentioned before that relationships matter most. The other thing that I would notice in teams is clarity. So clarity actually creates cohesion amongst teams. And this is where, what would I see a team doing? I would see a high-performing team on a regular basis. And this might be every 2 or 3 months. You don't have to be doing this every single weekly meeting or fortnightly meeting, but it's going, what is our team's purpose? And this, where I see the biggest aha moments for leaders, and this is particularly relevant for leaders of leaders. So you're thinking maybe GM, C-suite, right? Is first of all agreeing, why do we have a leadership team? Right? What is the purpose of this group? It's different than what's the purpose of the marketing departments there. I don't know, generate leads, create a brand, create engagement. But what is the role of that marketing leadership team to ensure that happens? When leadership teams can really identify that and revisit that and talk about what does it look like? Yeah, spot on. That can be really good. Again, high performing teams, they will talk about that.
Yes, that's right. And why we're here, what's our why to fly? And I get it, because if you're
why to fly, I love that.
That's my purpose. My purpose means what your why to fly. And if you go, I don't feel like flying on that, then that's probably not your purpose, or you've changed trajectory. But I love what you just said, because I think it has become, this might be a bit controversial, but leaders have teams. We know that. Their managers lead them, and it keeps going. And we're the same. We do a lot at mid to C-suite level. But if you're in a leadership team, you're there to create a collective, bringing every business team together. I call that a collective. It's even bigger than a team, right? Because there's no barriers or walls to make a difference. So if you're out there listening right now to this and you're in a leadership team, I'd love to ask you, Adrian, what's one thing they could go back and bring into a catch-up that isn't the same? I call them slinkies, the same conversation, something a bit different.
Yeah. I've got a routine set up that there's 8 different things. You can go. So if you meet monthly, boom, 8 different things, and you can repeat that. But it's the things that we talked about before. So on the relationships. So I'd be talking about, all right, I'd be putting focus on connection on one meeting. What is something we can do? Talking about psychological safety. Something as simple as going, right, what do we feel really comfortable in talking about with our group? And then what's something that's, it's kind of sitting in the bottom of your belly and it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. But what's something that maybe we don't feel 100% comfortable with? What might that be? And getting that out, right? Meeting number 3 can be around feedback. Let's talk about, right, here's something I really admire about you, Renee. And you know what? You'd be even better if you did this down the track. And then the conflict, right? Let's pick an idea, and then we're going to be intentionally, Renee, you're going to be the one to challenge my ideas today. I want you I want you to bring a different perspective. So there's a different, right? We're not doing the slinky. On the clarity side, revisit that purpose. Right. And make that list. What does good look like? Roles and responsibilities. We make these job descriptions, right? And they're at a point of time. This is what the business needs now to help us achieve our goals. Well, I'm guessing in 6 to 12 months, the landscape has changed. The things that need to get done and the priorities have changed. So particularly within leadership teams, it's important to revisit those roles and responsibilities. So it might be just something like, Renee, we're going to talk about you today. Everybody write down what you think Renee's responsibilities are. Renee, I want you to do the same thing. And then let's share each other's answers. And typically what you get there is you get some real black and whites. Yeah, it's very clear Renee's responsible for this. It's very clear this is not what Renee's responsible for. But there's this stuff in the middle, I call it the gray. Just by making people aware, like the whole group is aligned that there is some gray. So when something comes up, it's like, oh, I'm not sure. I better talk to Renee about this.
I love that. And I think there's some great tips there at any leadership level when you're catching up with your team. And I think it goes back to, it almost goes back to the basics with some focus. Why are we here? What's our why to fly? What are our values which lead into your purpose? And I love the bit, Adrian, you said around sharing clarity and getting clarity of role, because things do change. And I always say, you want to have a voice at the table. You don't want to suppress, you want to express. So what is between that? And to me, it's what you've mentioned, having some focus areas. I always love bringing the gift of gratitude into things too. Like, we tend to start off all our meetings, workshops with who or what are you grateful for?
Yeah.
And people, it's a game changer, because it gets you to think forward, have that forward thinking, that optimism, not positivity, optimism, to be in that frame of mind. One of the quotes that you mentioned was complacency is costly. I'm a big one for challenging the status quo. How can people do that a bit more?
Well, when I talk about complacency, Renee, I think when it comes to working together, particularly at senior leadership teams, you mentioned before, right? Like, people, if you're leading a team, that's what you consider your team. But the reality is, and this is building off the work that Patrick Lencioni did in 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, right? He talks about team 1 and team 2. Team 2 being the team that you lead, and team 1 being the team that you're part of. And I think that is something that at the senior level, whether it's director, GM, C-suite, sometimes they forget that they're actually part of a team, right?
Or the other way around.
Yes, well, yeah, it's about which one is important. But so I think what I find with teams is sometimes they just think that teamwork just happens on its own.
Yeah.
Right. But I think complacency is costly, but being deliberate pays dividends.
Yeah.
And so when it's about how do we avoid being complacent, we're very intentional about the things that we talk about or the things that we do as a leadership team. So I love when you're talking about get rid of that slinky, because in meetings, do people really need to hear what all other everybody's got 5 minutes to share what they're working on.
It's the saying, go around, what are you up to? It's a bit, to me, it's a bit like you or I getting asked to just talk at a team, like watch it on YouTube, right?
Well, but you know what that agenda item is really good for? Like, okay, everybody's got 5 minutes to go around. If you got 6 people, to me, that's 20 minutes I got to get my emails done.
Yeah, so do something. And I'm a big fan of running like masterminds. What's a challenge, an opportunity, or something you want to move faster on? The team can only ask you questions that you write down, only offer suggestions, and then you keep it all canned. And you can do that in 8 minutes. And I've personally seen people in senior leadership teams go, we've had that floating the slinky for a year and we've just nailed it in 8 minutes. I'd love to, God, we could talk all day. We've got to close soon, but I'd love to just ask you a little bit about, there was a model, and those of you that are getting the book, page 58, on Is Your Team Shining? I love models that are easy frameworks for a leader to be able to go and just decipher it and break it down. Can you run us through that model?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody listening, just imagine in your head a square broken up into 4 quadrants, right? And so when it comes to creating teams that shine or high performing, whichever terminology you like to, I use the word shine. It's based on relationships and clarity. So in a team where you have a real high level of maturity in terms of the relationships amongst the group, and the team has a high level of alignment, there's lots of clarity. That is a team that shines. And how do you know if your team is shining? One, the team works really hard, but the energy is renewed because they're making really good progress. They're making a meaningful impact.
Yeah, love it.
They can see the outcomes of what they're doing. The other sign that a team is shining is that sometimes they're arguing, sometimes they're debating, but they can get through it and people are happy to be persuaded, right? When there's debate, to me, there's 2 jobs. You're either persuading or you can be persuaded, and both of them are really good. The other thing that a shining team does is they actually, because the team is working so well, that frees up the leader to influence more broadly. So you will typically see shining teams not just performing well in their department or division, but they're actually influencing more broadly across the business, or even at the highest level, they're influencing at an industry level.
Yeah.
So those are two little triggers there. Now on the flip side, do we want to talk about the sinking team? Do we want to go there?
Well, if you're shining right now, those of you out there, and I just keep hearing shine bright like a diamond, you need to put music in your model. I'm hearing that. You will know straight away. If you're not feeling that, what might that look like, Adrian?
So if you're not feeling like that, it could look like three different ways, right? So the first one is sinking. So that's the bottom left hand of this model. That's when you have really poor relationships and low levels of clarity. Nobody really knows what the team is working on. They're not across who's trying to, what objectives they're trying to achieve. They haven't actually talked about which behaviors are going to drive the success of the team. These teams are really scary from a business perspective, but an individual perspective, because from a business perspective, what are they delivering? Issues. They're actually not delivering any results. Those teams are typically quiet. In those team meetings sometimes, and somebody asks a question and nobody answers. That's a sign that the team is sinking. The other one is like if you have high number of 6 days, absenteeism, mental health issues, because what happens in these teams, they're not making any progress. They have no support. Their confidence is getting beat up, right? And ultimately, people start questioning themselves, and all they're like, man, I just want to get by today. I just need to get by. And they're swearing.
They're not thriving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could call it a surviving team. And the swearing in that team is about themselves on an individual level. It's like, what the F am I doing? Why am I not doing so good? God, I'm SH.
That's awesome. So if you're in that down, that sort of sinking or stagnant sort of quadrant, yeah, you're swearing at yourself. Whereas when you're shining, you're swearing by each other. I love it.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love that. Absolutely love that. Like I said, I think, Adrian, we might have to do a part 2 soon. I'd love to do that with you. There's some great insights in the book. What I loved about it too, and huge congratulations on you. There's some really easy to follow frameworks. There's stories, there's metaphors that make it a really easy to read book with key takeaways at the end of each chapter, which I'm a big fan of. Before we finish up, I'd just love to ask my 3 trivia questions. What is your favorite noise?
My favorite noise? Renee, I've never been asked what my favorite noise is.
I know. That's why I love asking it.
You know what? I've got, particularly in the summer, I'll have my breakfast, go for a workout, come home, have breakfast outside. Yeah. I've got this beautiful tree in front of our house.
Oh, gorgeous.
It's just in full bloom. And then what adds to it, and anytime if I'm talking to somebody on FaceTime back home, they're like, where are those birds?
Yeah.
Those sounds of those birds in the morning.
Beautiful. And I know where you live. You're not far from me, and we get probably about 30 different sounds.
It's beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's your favorite noise. What's your favorite word?
Oh, boy. Apparently I say right on a lot.
I'll let you have it. It's 2 words, but because you roll it, we'll make it 1.
Yeah, that's the Aussie side coming out.
Your last day on our beautiful planet and you're having dinner, what is your last meal that you will have?
Lasagna, Caesar salad, and some garlic toast.
We might have to have our last day together. And if you went back in time and could be anything else than what you're doing now, is there something that you'd go, oh, I wish I'd done that?
I don't think look, growing up, 5-year-old, I wanted to play ice hockey with the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah.
So that would probably be something I'd love to be able to play in the Montreal Forum back in the 80s. So that's probably one thing that I would have loved to have.
I love it. I love it. And I think, look, everything that we are, who we've become and who we're continually becoming is based on every moment moving forward. I'm a big believer in that and who we're being. Anyone listening to this today, I'm sure you can listen to this again or watch this again and take some great notes. one thing I will say is create your to-be list. We do that with clients, not your to-do, because you can do a million things and have something, but if you're being who you need to be before you do those things, it will be more, effortless and easier for you. Adrian, I've absolutely loved our chat. How can our listeners and viewers find you?
All right. There's a couple ways they can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Adrian Baillargeon. Baillargeon is a tough one to spell. So if you visit adrianthecanadian.com, that'll take you to my website.
Love that. And we will have these in the show notes.
Yeah, so I found that's a little bit easier to spell. If you want to grab a copy of the book, it's on teamsthatswear.com. And I'd love, can I give all the listeners a gift today?
I was just going to ask you if you had any gifts, which, you always go, I hope you do. What's the gift you want to share?
All right. I would love for anybody who loves reading the books on the iPad or the book, for the next 10 days, I'm happy to give everybody a free copy of the e-version of Teams That Swear. When they go to teamsthatswear.com, click on the digital book. And when you go to check out, just use the coupon code Swear by Renee. And it's Renee, Renee. Don't worry about the accent on the top, because I don't even know how to do that on my laptop. So we just want to keep it really simple. So if we just go Swear by Renee, it'll knock off the price and you'll get that sent directly to your inbox, no cost.
Amazing. Make sure you take advantage of that in a good way. So, that'll be up and available 10 days from when this podcast has been published. Thank you so much, Adrian. I've absolutely just loved our chat. To all our listeners and viewers out there, if you've got any feedback, we'd love to hear. If you're loving the show, please leave a 5-star rating and share with those in your community. Just before I close out, I'd just like to share that our Cook and Connect one-day team retreat has gone live. So we've run a few this year. Now we're running it in-house for corporate. So it's an awesome day, and I have to say, I just can't stop smiling when I run it. So we run a Italian cooking class in the morning out at Billanook Winery in the Yarra Valley. And then we do some walking meditation. And then I run you through with Sean Tucker, who does a lot of energy work. We run you through reflecting on and honoring your journey. Where have you been, the gift mindset. And we go into tips to reconnect to yourself and others and to re-energize and do what lights you up. So it's a great day for you and your team to take that connection to the next level. So just visit my website for that, reneegiarrusso.com, and you'll see there's a whole retreat page where you can register your interest. Thanks for listening. Have a great day or night wherever you are. Thanks, Adrian.
You've been listening to Limitless Leaders Podcast, leading from the inside out to develop limitless self-leadership, leaders, teams and organizations. To find out how you can accelerate your mindset, your communication, collaboration and connection to become a limitless leader, sign up for our Limitless Leaders Podcast series at www.reneegiarrusso.com/podcast series. That's reneegiarrusso.com/podcast series.